So you guys may think of me as a book publisher. Let me ask you, how many of you here have Oreilly books? Okay, fair number of you. And you know, some of you may come to some of our conferences. How many of you have been to the open source convention? Okay, not so many. How about our Web 2 events, Web 2.0 Expo or Web 2? Again, Drupal community doesn't seem to overlap too much with but the heart of what we think we do at Oreilly is that we try to change the world by spreading the knowledge of innovators. We try to learn from people who are out there on the cutting edge and figure out how to tell their stories. We tell them through books, we tell them through conferences, we tell them through online video, we tell them through really any means that we can use. We tell them through private gatherings where we try to bring people together to share ideas and think about the future. And we have this methodology we started to call it the Oreilly Radar. And it's really summed up by this wonderful quote from William Gibson, the science fiction writer. He said, "The future is here. It's just not evenly distributed yet." So when we created the first commercial website in 1993, it's actually a little known fact that Oreilly was the first commercial website. I should say the first advertising supported website. It wasn't clear that that was going to be the future that we're all living in, but it was already happening. And I still remember driving down 101 and seeing my first URL on a billboard. And it was like, wow, some of us had been living in that future for a while, and all of a sudden it became mainstream. And this happens again and again. So what we do is we watch people that I affectionately refer to as alpha geeks. These are the people who are on the cutting edge, who can roll their own with technology, make interesting things happen. And then we think about the futures that they are living in, and then we look for signs of that future spreading more evenly. So in this talk, I'm going to tell you some stories that seem to be disconnected, and then I'm going to try to connect the dots. So the first story. About 5 years ago, we launched a magazine called Make Magazine. How many of you are familiar with Make?
Oh, yeah.
Hey, good number. Okay, good. How many have been to Maker Faire? Oh, you guys have got to go. So 70,000 people, like a county fair with robots, in May at San Mateo Fairgrounds. But Make got us focused on something bubbling up. There was this new innovation around hardware hacking and the whole DIY spirit. And we saw people playing with sensors in particular and sensor platforms. And what was interesting, I mentioned Maker Faire already, was a couple of years ago I published 2 books roughly the same time. I mean, they came out, 6-7 months apart, but they were in the process, and I was sort of looking at them in the same time frame. And I was so fascinated that our book on learning OpenCV, which is a computer vision package, an open source computer vision package, and our book called Programming Collective Intelligence, actually were about a lot of the same algorithms. That is, the kind of web techniques that a Google will use or the Netflix prize will use are actually very similar to the algorithms used in machine learning and machine vision. So this whole area of sensors and machine learning became very interesting to me. And of course, open source hardware. At the heart of many of the Make projects is something called Arduino, and it's this sort of hackable sensor controller board developed by some people in Italy. It's sort of spreading in the same way as the early web spread. And that says to us, ooh, there's an interesting future happening here. And so you can start to see pieces of this sensor future. And just give you one example. At our Emerging Technologies Conference in 2006, we had a demo by an NYU professor called Jeff Hahn of this big multi-touch display. You've probably seen it on like CNN when they did election coverage. That's actually Jeff's work. He later started a company. But back then, it was just geek stuff out of the labs. He was a homebrew rig. So he was a hacker, built this cool stuff. And of course, we know what happened to multi-touch, right? It became this phenomenon that transformed the phone market. So that's just a reminder. Once again, you see something. 5 years ago, we saw hackers playing with this stuff, and 3 or 4 years later, it's in sort of this revolutionary set of consumer products. So hackers build devices that show off possible futures, and then entrepreneurs and innovative companies take those futures and push them to the mainstream. But so what does that future include when we think about the cloud, right? It's devices that are acting as sensors for intelligent data collection. It's devices whose UI is on the web rather than on the device itself. Like here's a good one I have. I've been carrying this thing. I've lost about 15 pounds in the last year as a result of carrying this little device. It's called Philips Direct Life. It reminds me how much activity I have and nags me if I haven't been active enough. And hey, where's the UI? I plug it on with a little USB connector into my laptop, and it pops up a web page and reports to me, and I interact with it there. And these devices, our phones most obviously, but increasingly all kinds of other devices, are really feeding data into web services. And this is really just the beginning, I think, of a future of robotics, augmented reality, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about, and a whole next generation of personal electronics. And it's so important to think about this because the world of the web that we've all grown up with is getting kind of old. We're nearly 20 years into the web. And so we have to be thinking, what's the next wave? So speaking of being old, I had a really kind of wake-up moment not long ago. I met with Jack Dorsey, co-founder of Twitter. He was going to show me Square, his new startup, which is still in stealth. And we met at Blue Bottle Coffee, which is not far from here. And I thought, oh, Jack's going to take me back to his office to show me this stuff, because of course he didn't have a laptop with him. And of course he whipped out his phone. And I went, oh wow, I'm showing my age. I'm kind of expecting him to show me something on a laptop, and a phone is all he needs. And of course Square is this revolutionary little device that you add on to an iPhone that lets anybody take a credit card. But it doesn't stop there. You've got this very cool little, you can use the camera to take a picture of the person's signature if they sign for this thing you've just sold them on the street corner. It shows where the transaction happened. You can append a photo of the person to your receipt and so on. So this is really the front edge. Again, a tiny little device, a hack, that doesn't live in this same world that we've been used to living in. Right? The PC is out of the loop. The phone is a sensor platform. The little Square device actually takes the credit card swipe and turns it into an audio pulse, which is fed in through the microphone jack on your phone. And a lot of interesting touchscreen stuff happening there. But the most important thing is the processing is done in the cloud. As Jack was explaining this to me, he was talking about how a lot of where they thought their value was going to be is in being able to do social network and analytics to figure out how much credit to extend to people when they're giving or accepting credit cards.